If God would present you with a call that you could do in your own strength, it would be void of your need for him.
Absolutely.
So the very fact that you feel less than is why he's calling you,
Yeah.
because success is in the step of obedience. I love that you said that, because things in your life to detour you from the purpose and plan of God are distractions. And
Hmm.
only when you succumb to them do you not reach the other side.
So, Brenda, thank you for joining us on the Restore for Purpose podcast. Glad to have you here.
Super glad to be here. I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. It's going to be fire, guys. Listen, I need a fire extinguisher somewhere. So, yeah, Brenda, tell us about yourself because, I know of you, but some people might not know you who watch this podcast. So, yeah, like, let's hear
Mhm.
it. So,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised. Now I kind of reside between Chicago and LA. I'm a preacher, a producer, a podcaster. I have a podcast called Life in Perspective, and I have a podcast with my friends called In the Room. I don't know, man. Like I really love Jesus, and I've dedicated my life to, no matter what platform, is just like sharing my journey with people and hoping that they're able to like discover who Jesus is and that they desire a relationship with him, because it's honestly the best decision you can ever make in your life. And so in this season of my life, I've dedicated my life to that. I quit my job, my day-to-day job. I was working for a church, so I no longer do that, and now I am traveling around the country hosting pop-up experiences and gatherings so that people can find a way to encounter Jesus. And so that's me in a nutshell.
okay. So, how did you come to the faith? Like, what was your Jesus moment? Like your first interaction with Christ? Like, what was that like for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I kind of grew up in church.
Mm,
I've probably been going to church since I was like 4 years old. My parents are pastors. They didn't really get saved until I was about like 4, 5, 6, in that
mm,
space, like, well, really living the way they should live. But my parents are pastors, so I grew up with two pastors as parents. I always say I grew up in church, but I didn't grow in relationship with Jesus. I wouldn't say that I actually got serious about my relationship with Jesus until I was maybe like my second year of college, where I kind of understood what it meant to like take the Bible that we read on a Sunday and like apply it to my everyday life.
mm,
Um, and then I would say like that's when I got serious about my relationship. I say the moment I knew Jesus was real probably happened soon later in life than people would expect me to say, but probably like 2018, I experienced like this traumatic event. And I feel like the worst time of my life, I came face to face with who Jesus really is. I
mm,
discovered his heart. I learned what it meant to love people the way that he does. In spite of how we treat him, Jesus never changes on us. And I
mm,
feel like through that journey of betrayal and processing what it meant to start life over when the foundation that you built your life on has kind of been ripped apart
mm,
from you, I felt like I learned who God really was. I feel like in that season is when I developed a heart where I could be considered a pastor, or a heart that just has like be able to care for people beyond what they've done to you. I feel like I
mm.
learned that. And I think in that season, I really, really had a face to face moment with Jesus. And then I think every day I'm reminded of who Jesus is, because I recognize who I was in that season where I wanted to give up on life and I didn't feel like I had anything to live for. And then to see who I am today, that I can wake up with joy and be like, dang, only God did this, like, so I feel like it isn't just one encounter. I feel like we live a life of encounters where we come face to face with Jesus, and over again, we're reminded of who he is.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a podcast called Life in Perspective. What
Mhm.
what is that?
Okay, so that's a great question. I ask myself that every day. What is that? But really, it's a step of obedience. During the pandemic, I had this random idea that I wanted to start a podcast. So when I first moved to LA, I was vlogging a lot. I was just like sharing like these little moments in my bedroom, like, here's what God's like saying to me. And so originally, my podcast was going to just take the audio of those videos and upload them. And I was like,
Mm,
yeah. Then I was like, I have questions. I was going to call it I Got Questions and talk about things in culture and all the questions I had. And then one day, my friend called me and gave me a word. And she said, whatever God is asking you to do in this season, take it serious. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't really know what that meant. And so when I started praying, and God brought up the podcast again. And so if you're a creative, I always have an idea. I'm always like, oh, I could do this thing. I could do that. And some of them become things and some of them just are ideas. And so I felt like God brought the podcast back up to me. And so in prayer of like, okay, what, maybe I should really take this serious. I went and bought a microphone. I didn't know anything about podcasting.
Yeah.
And God was like, it's time. And I'm like, it's time for what? To start a podcast. Okay, let's do it. He said, no, I want you to start off with sharing a story. And I was like, nah, bro, I don't have a story. Because what he was asking me to share, I never intended to share that ever in my life. It was kind of like this is going to my grave thing with me. Like it's a part of who I am. It's made me become the woman that I am today, but I never intended to share it in detail. And so I remember him saying like, no, this is really what I needed to be. And so I feel like the start of the podcast was me kind of paralleling what we were experiencing in life through the pandemic and how I felt like I had my own pandemic 2 years prior to that, which gave me this faith to sustain me during the pandemic, because that part of my life unraveled me, and the pandemic did that for a lot of us. And so it kind of started as this journey of like, man, we've been here before, but maybe in a different context. And so Life in Perspective is just my way of sharing what I'm experiencing in the moment and being able to view it through the perspective of my faith. So this sucks, but what does God say about this moment? And so it's transitioned in this season to conversations with my friends where we're doing the same thing. We're talking about defining moments, those moments in life that are not the greatest or they suck. And then it's like, but what does God say about this moment? And who was I supposed to become through this moment, and how can I use it to, grow in life?
Yeah. So obviously, like the name of this podcast is called the Restore for Purpose podcast, right? And so you say that God was asking you to share your story with people, and you was like, no, but this made me. This is what made me who I am, made me to be able to build my faith, to be able to navigate. And one thing that I realized is that sometimes we go through things and we think it's for us. We think it's just me and God. Like me and whoever was involved in this situation is just for us. Like I don't need to share it with everyone. But I truly believe that God puts us or allows us to go through certain things to be able to use it for his glory at the end of the day, to show people that yes, I can restore you. I can take your mess, your ash, and give it beauty. I can make it wonderful. And I think it's even similar to like what happened with Joseph in the Bible, where his brothers and everyone, they basically sold him, and they thought they were doing something to him. And then Potiphar's wife came with the whole, lusting after him type vibe.
Listen.
And he went from worst to worstest. That's not even a word, but it just started getting worse.
Yeah.
But then God used that to elevate him, and he said, because of this that I allowed you to, what man meant for evil, I've worked it all together for your good. And I think like there's beauty in restoration, but people are afraid to either share or to experience restoration. What do you have to say about that? Like what, that whole restoration process for you, what was that like? And also when obviously God said, I want you to share this with the world, like what was I know you touched on it a little bit, but what was the resistance to a degree to like say, you know what, I can actually share this and show, what God has done through me?
Yeah, I think two things. I think I didn't realize I was in a restoration process until I was in a restoration process. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't know what was happening until it was happening. And then I could look back and go like, oh, I'm not where I was. And this isn't affecting me. And to be completely honest, it didn't start with the podcast, like as it relates to sharing the story, right? That was a step on the journey. And the resistance is for me specifically about that story was, which I feel like people can identify with, was like I carried a lot of shame concerning the situation. I felt like there were some spaces where I would blame myself for it happening. I didn't really understand why it had to happen. It was kind of like, this is from left field and I don't really understand this. And so I feel like usually it's fear, right? It's either fear of man, it's fear of what people will think, what will they say, how will people now look at me? also how does this affect the other people that are involved in this situation, right? Because it isn't just about me. This is my truth. We like to say it's my truth. It's how it affected me, but sharing this story also affects the lives of others, and that was a huge thing for me. The situation, it severed ties of people that I considered family, and I knew that sharing could come across in a way that would feel messy, even though that wasn't my intent. And I never wanted my heart to be misinterpreted. I never wanted it to feel like I was like trying to do something. It's like I didn't want to do it. Like I didn't want to do it at all. But I noticed that God took me through a process where, like, originally, if I would tell the story, it would be like reliving it again. It would be like I would feel all the same emotions. I would get short of breath. It would be like I hated talking about it. And then I could see, as the more he would have me share it in smaller spaces or a one-on-one person, and talk about forgiveness, then I could see I would gain authority over it a little bit more. It was like, it's like, the scripture, like, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. But the other part of that says, and they love their lives not too much that they were afraid to lose it. Right. So it's like that deals with like reputation and what people will think and what they will say. It's like, the more I shared it, I was able to be okay with it. Then sometimes I crack a joke in it, like it didn't, I learned that it didn't have power over me. And I think a lot of that situation has to do about the people and more about what the enemy designed for it to do, which was for it to steal my voice. And so I believe that God calling me to do the podcast was his way of saying, I need you to go beyond this moment. I don't need this thing that you've experienced to silence you. I don't need it to take from you. I don't need it to, because I literally went inside myself. So stepping into that space and being publicly sharing it was like, what? Absolutely not. And so there was a level of freedom that came in that, but the apprehension is always like fear. It's like, what does this mean? What does this look like? But I love that. I think it's Psalms 23, and it says, I cause you to lie down in green pastures. I'll restore your soul. And I love that it's like, lay down is like it's almost forceful, right? It's not really an invitation. It's like, go lay down. And because sometimes it's like we come to these moments that cause us to lay in a space where we sit and we reflect on what really happened. How did it affect me? So we can go into a space of restoration. And so I remember right before I released my podcast, we're sitting we're filming for during the pandemic, a sermon, and Pastor Sarah's preaching about how sometimes the will of God will cause you pain. And I remember I literally cried the entire time. It's probably like 5 of us in the room, and I was bawling because I knew what God was asking me to do. I knew what it was going to cost me. I knew it meant like not going back. I knew it meant this is a step towards Jesus, but it is a step away from everything that I know, for real. Because I had never talked about it in that situation. We kind of ended on good terms, but I know to talk about something is about to game. And so I felt like God, he just asked me, he said, do you care more about what people think about you than what I'm asking you to do?
Let's touch on that part there. You see that? Caring about what people think about you.
Yeah. No, because that is a question I feel like he consistently has asked me throughout my life. Is like, do you care more about people or do you care more about what I'm asking you to do? Because I literally was just telling some people the other day, like, to literally die to your flesh is to die to your considerations. Right. Everything that you would ever consider that causes you to go, don't really want to follow God, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I feel like the answer to that question is no, I don't care more about what people think over what you're asking me to do. Now, do I care what they think? 100%. Do I care that people are going to be looking at me a little crazy? Yeah. But does that override the instruction of the Lord? Never. Yeah. And so it was a decision in that moment. It was a decision to say, God, at all costs, I'm going to follow you. No matter what I lose in this situation, following you is what's taking precedence, because to not follow you, I lose more.
All right. So how do you do that practically? Like, so for anyone listening that might be thinking, like, Brenda, I hear that. Like, I get it that I'm going to follow Jesus all the way. but I'm still battling with these thoughts in my head, like, yo, people are
Hmm.
gonna say something about you, or like there's other people involved. They might come back and we squashed everything, but they might now come back and say, what are you doing? Or different things that will just come up
Yeah.
to like kind of deter you from wanting to do that. How do you practically navigate that whole process of dying to your flesh, picking up your cross, and literally following Jesus?
This is going to sound very simple, but it's a decision. Like I'm not minimizing any of those things. It's literally a decision. I have to make a decision and stick to that. Was it hard? Absolutely. If you listen to my cast episode 1, I share the story, I cried. When I get to episode 4, I think it's episode 4, it literally is called I Need a Moment. And I'm literally crying the entire episode because I've now experienced the fruit of that decision.
Mm.
And it hurt. It caused me pain. I had to, so it is making a decision, understanding that it ain't gonna be easy, but also knowing that God's always with you in it. Because everything that I experienced as an aftermath of following Jesus, I can tell you over the course of the next 3 years, I would get random phone calls out of the blue of people apologizing to me.
Wow.
I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to explain anything. I didn't host a news conference to say this is why, you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't engage in, because the thing is, if there is a instruction from the Lord, that's it. It
Mm.
doesn't need an explanation. I'm not about to be chasing it either. I can't chase down how it made people feel. I just have to trust that God got me. I've
Mm.
never seen the righteous forsaken. So I'm not gonna make a decision in following Jesus and then he just gonna leave me out here. That it don't work like that. And
Yeah.
so there is this ability to say, okay, God, what is faith? Okay, the definition of faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not seen. So
Mm.
right now, God, I can't see your protection, but there is faith in who you are that knows I am protected. And so
Mm.
I trust that you're gonna have me. So in making this decision, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know how people are gonna respond. I don't know how they're gonna react, but none of that overrides who God is and who he is to me. And so it is this decision that says, yes, I am afraid, but I am choosing to trust God. And it's making the decision right in that moment, and not just verbally and out of your mouth, but in your heart, making the decision to say, okay, God, this, I don't like this, but I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Is it-
saying? And
Yeah.
yeah, and seeing the fruit from it. You know what I'm saying? Like I've never taken a chance on God and came up short.
Mm.
Never.
Yeah, and I think for you, like I'm sure if you look back from where you are right now, you will be thankful for making that decision because life could be completely
100%.
different. I know because like you haven't said it, but you've gone on to do some amazing things. Like
Mhm.
that's how I even came across you. Like God has positioned you in places where I don't know. I don't want to tell your story for you, but God has
No, no.
positioned God has positioned you in places where I'm sure for you, you would have thought, raw. Like if when I was crying back then, if I knew that this is where I was gonna be, I would have been like, yeah, God, let's go now. You know,
Yeah,
So
for sure.
and I think it's the one that there's a scripture that says whoever's willing to lose his life will
Yep.
save.
We'll
You know,
we'll save
like
it. Hmm.
so I think yes, it's hard to make that decision, and even for myself, I can make that decision every day, and I believe in something where it's like I heal on the go. Things are gonna happen to me, things are gonna happen around me, to my family members or whatever. But what's God's purpose? What's God's mission for me? And God is able to restore me on the way. And it's me having that boldness to say, you know what, God, you above everything else. You above
Yeah.
everything else. And in that my joy is restored. In that my peace is restored. In that my faith is lifted. You know what I mean? So yeah, I truly believe that making that decision and saying, you know what, I know I'm thinking this. I know the devil's saying this to me. But you know what God has said is greater than that. You know.
Yep. A
Um,
100%.
so one thing that I always rant on about is being kingdom ambassadors and kingdom
Hmm.
citizens. You you'll never hear me say any sentence on this, especially on this podcast. I'm not saying God has called us to be kingdom ambassadors. He has restored us
Yeah.
for purpose, especially for this time. And I know that a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, it's this time," but I truly believe that something is shifting in the atmosphere in this season, and God is calling His mighty army to rise up again. Right.
Hmm.
So when like if I was to say kingdom ambassador, what does that mean to you? Like when what do you see or think of when you hear kingdom ambassador?
Well, the first thing I think of is the scriptures that talk about like we are ambassadors, right? And when you think of an ambassador, they go to a foreign land and they represent the place that they come from. They don't
Mm,
even assimilate to the way that the people live in that place. Like when they are there, people recognize that they are from the country that sent them
yeah,
there. And
yeah,
so when I think of it from that perspective, I'm not from earth. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not a part of this world. I come
yeah.
from a kingdom, and there is a way that I need to represent where I come from. So I
Mm,
don't, Romans 12:1, I don't conform to this world. I'm in it, but I'm not of it. And
yeah,
so for me, it looks like, how do I, no matter what space I am in, how do I represent the kingdom of God, which is to establish God's will on earth, right?
mm,
So what does God want to do in this space? So if I'm in a room, if I'm in a conversation, if I'm in a relationship, if I've been presented with an opportunity, what does it look like to manifest what God has already established in heaven here on earth? And I
mm,
think sometimes we can think that being a kingdom ambassador is about us. So
mm,
I obtain all these things to make things happen. No, that's not what it is. To be a kingdom ambassador is I'm here sent on assignment to establish what already exists in this space. And
yeah,
so it really means it really means to, I don't go in a room with an agenda. I go in a room with his agenda, and I
yeah,
show up to the space and go, okay, God, what you want to do? And what
yeah,
do you want to say? How do I navigate this? And what is the overall purpose? It's like, even like if I'm gonna preach a sermon, that's the first thing I ask is like, okay, God, what do you want to say? You
yeah,
know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like I could come up with a whole bunch of ideas. I could go get a whole bunch of stories and just start spewing off things. But God had the ability to see the beginning from the end, right? So he saw this moment before the beginning of time and he gave it a purpose. Now my job is to surrender to that moment and to that purpose of that moment and go, okay, God, what did you intend for this moment? And that's what I'm trying to submit to. And so I think to be a kingdom ambassador means to be the hands and feet of Jesus, right? It's to show up as a representative of who God is, which means not just in the doing, right? But in the being. So
Yeah.
my response should be a reflection of who I serve,
Mm,
what I say, what I do. You know what I'm saying? All the things about me should reflect who he is. And I think that is how we are ambassadors for the kingdom, right? And we draw people to go, hey, I want to be a part of where they from. You know what I'm
mm,
saying? Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to how can I be down? You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? And so I
yeah,
think like that is the goal. I think that's God's original intent in his heart,
yeah.
for us.
Absolutely. And for someone who's like saying, okay, cool, I know God is calling me. I know God is I've heard this call, like you know how Isaiah in Isaiah 6, he says in in the time that King Uzziah died, that he saw the Lord and
Mm-hmm.
he said, who shall we send? And he said, here I am, send me. I've heard that call, you know. But for us to come to the point of saying, here I am, Lord, send me, yeah, how
Mm-hmm.
some people don't feel ready. And I think that's one of the mandates that God has given me to do this podcast specifically, where he says so many of my children are sleeping. Not
Mm-hmm.
they're not sleeping physically, but they're sleeping on their calling. They're distracted. You know, too much has happened in their life, and it's there's disappointment. There's all sorts of different things, and they
Yeah.
just feel ready. They don't feel equipped to go out there and do what God is asking them to do. What would you say to someone who doesn't feel ready to fulfill the kingdom assignment? You know, how would you
Mm-hmm.
encourage such a person?
I think two things. I think the first thing I would say is it's not about you.
It's not about you.
It's not about you. And so all of the things you just said is like, I don't feel ready. I don't feel
Mm,
qualified. I've been through too much. All of those statements start with I. So
mm,
the first thing I would say is it's not about you. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like those are maybe all valid things. I think it's so interesting there. I came across this scripture in First Corinthians 1:9, and it literally says, God will do this. He's faithful to do what he
yeah,
said he would do. He's just inviting you into partnership with
that's it.
our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yeah.
So the moment you say, I can't do this, he's not asking you to.
Mm,
He's really just asking you to say yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you would never, you never be qualified enough. You'll never be good enough. You'll never be ready. If
Mm.
if God would present you with a call that you could do in your own strength, it would be void of your need for him.
Absolutely.
So the very fact that you feel less than is why he's calling you, because the calling is to bring glory to his name. So the fact he would use a person who doesn't measure up and make them measure up is a proof of who he is. And so I think when I get the perspective that when I chose to follow Jesus, I said, my life ain't about me. So no, I don't feel ready. I don't ever want to do half the things I'm all like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm having a whole conversation with God, like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But at the end of that, don't want to do this, but it's like, okay, God, whatever you say. Even Jesus himself has a conversation with the Lord and goes, hey, if you want to take this cup from me, you at this point and how I feel right now, you can have it. And we know that moment wasn't about the fact that Jesus didn't want to die. It meant that for the first time in his life, he was going to be separated from his Father. And he said, man, God, I really ain't trying to do that.
Yeah.
So if you want to, if you want to pass this on down to somebody else, by all means. But then in that same very moment, he says, nevertheless, not my will, but yours. And that is the posture in which we have to live, right? When we're faced with our inadequacies, when we're faced with our fears, when we are faced with our dreams and passions that contradict what God's asking us to do in that moment, it is a nevertheless, not my will, but yours. And so I keep saying this, but it is truly a decision. It's like, we got to stop playing games in the strategy of the enemy that keeps us going in circles and keeps us ineffective. And also with this prideful spirit that makes us feel like we have a luxury of time that says, oh, I'll do it, in a couple of days, I'll get around to it, when someone's life depends on that decision. If I told you that someone's eternity hung in the balance of you following Jesus, you'd get serious about it. You'd overlook all the excuses that you keep bringing to the table. And when I'm saying someone's life depends on it, because it does. When God gives an assignment, there are lives attached to it. And that is the weight in which I carry a decision in. It's like, man, no, I don't want to do this. But whose life and whose encounter with Jesus is hanging on whether or not I do this? And it ain't always asked. Sometimes it's when you roll over at 3:00 in the morning, it's just saying a prayer because God woke you up. Someone's eternity or encounter hangs on the balance of that. Then it's serious. Then it's like, okay, it ain't about me. It's so much bigger than how I feel in this moment. And that's why God says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. Because my understanding could be rooted in my emotions and they aren't built to carry me, but he is. So instead of leaning on how I feel, I'm going to choose to go on I'm going to lean on what God said, because that's solid enough to hold me up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we shouldn't even be like oblivious to the fact that the enemy has a strategy.
For sure.
He's like, yo, okay, you're calling Esther, you're calling Brenda to come and do this. If they do that, then 10,000 people are about to be saved. And he will cause a storm. Like I remember when, Jesus was in a boat and with the disciples, and they were crossing over to the other side, and then a whole storm came about, like they were crying and whatnot, and obviously Jesus settled the storm. But as immediately as they got to the shore, the Bible says that the man that was possessed with legion, the multiple demons came and said, "Why are you here? It's not my time." And my thinking is, the Bible says that this guy was in a cave. He lived in a cave. How did he know Jesus was coming? Do you know what I mean? To come and worship him and to say, no, it's not our time yet. And the storm was obviously there from what my understanding to deter them from getting to that side. Because when Jesus delivered that man, he went on to deliver 10 cities for the Lord. He evangelized. So it's like, if things are happening in your life where you're saying, yo, like, every time I try to do something for the Lord, something messes up. Every time I try to do this happens. It's like when I do God's thing, like, things just get worse. It's because of that, of what can come out of what you want to do in life. Do you know what I mean? So it's go on if you want to say something. I think
No. I was gonna say I love that you use that story, because it highlights distractions.
right.
Because before they get in the boat, Jesus says, let's get in the boat and go to the other side.
Yeah.
The fact that Jesus got in that boat and said other side, that was going to happen.
Facts.
So they are afraid of a storm. We're about to die. Jesus is asleep. He is
Mm,
sleeping, knocked
yeah.
out on the boat. And they are disgruntled. They are fearing for their lives, like they're
Mm,
going to die. And all of the things that are happening around them made them forget what Jesus said.
right, right.
Because if they would have remembered what he said, then they would have known, oh, this, even though this storm is rocking this boat, we ain't gonna die. Because
Yeah,
Jesus said we're going to the other side. And
facts.
so I love that you said that, because things in your life to detour you from the purpose and plan of God are distractions. And
Mm-hmm.
only when you succumb to them do you not reach the other side.
Yeah,
It's our agreement with the distraction that pulls us away from what God already said. And we'll
mm-hmm.
still get there. We just end up off in some other stuff. Because what if they would have just started jumping off the boat? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, there are so many decisions they could have made in that
Yeah.
other than going to Jesus and reminding themselves what he said. And so I think you have to do that. It's like, if God is asking you to do something, it's already gonna come to pass. Now it's on me to submit and surrender to that moment to
Mm,
ensure that it comes to pass.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that part where you said where they went back to Jesus, even though they
Hmm.
complained, don't you
Even
care?
though, yeah, yeah.
We're
He
about to
like,
die
what
here.
you mean? Don't I care? I
Yeah,
already said what I
I
said.
did.
It was
Yeah,
already finished. Yeah.
facts. And I think it's just reminding ourselves, like, you know, what God has said. God is not a man that he will lie. He will
Nope.
never, he'll never tell you something or speak a word into your life and be like, oh yeah, I just wanted to flex and say certain things. He will
Yeah.
always bring it to pass. And sometimes we forget that that is God, that God is God and he's not a human.
Hmm.
And one thing I learned I heard one of a pastor say one time. He said that when God gives you like a prophecy or a word into your life, it's an invitation to invite you into that space to
Yep.
come and experience it with Him. So when we forget those words, when we forget even just the scriptures, the text, like that's when we start getting overwhelmed by the storm around us. So I
Hmm.
think it's very key that we don't get distracted by the enemy's devices. Um, Brenda, how has God restored you for his purpose? Like, what is God doing through you? Obviously, you said your story already of how God restored you, um, and you didn't even realize you was being restored as you were
Yeah.
going. But you're here now. Like, the only reason, well, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why you're on this podcast is because I saw you in your purpose. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, how I don't even know how I can even word this, but how did God restore you for His purpose? Like, what is your kingdom assignment at this point in time?
Yeah. Man, that's a good question. I think it's something that is, I feel like, consistently being revealed. I'm learning it. I think, man, in this season, I think I said at the beginning of the podcast, like, man, I just want people to know Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
I really, like, that is really all I care about. And so I feel like I think my journey of restoration has looked a lot like God revealing the importance of my voice in this season and in this time. Whereas went through a space where I didn't want to talk, I didn't want to say anything, and I didn't recognize that I was living under a stronghold caused by pain. Like, I
Mm,
literally, I feel like I got delivered during a fast right before I started my podcast. I
wow.
went on like a 21 fast. And the last 7 days, I did water only. That was the first time I ever water fasted. I was like, this is next level. And I remember the first day of the water fast, I was having trouble breathing. It was weird. It was just like, I think my body was like not used to not eating. It's like, we
Mm,
figured out. And I remember like gasping for air. And I remember God saying, as important as breath is to life, is as important as your voice is to this generation.
wow. Wow.
And I needed that word, not so I could look forward to blowing up, but so that I could understand the necessity of when God says speak, to speak.
Mm,
And after experiencing a season that made me never, I didn't want to do anything.
mm,
I just went inside myself. I was never showing up to spaces to be like the light that God called me to be, just in personality form. You know what I'm saying? Like just being in a room, I just be stuck in my phone, because I never wanted to open myself up to be able to experience that level of pain again. So it
Yeah.
caused me to shut down. And I feel like I think that God has taken me on this journey of me understanding how important my voice is, but also that I'm worthy of love.
Mm.
Because after experiencing betrayal and rejection and hurt and brokenness,
Mm.
it puts you in a space where you feel like, man, you aren't worthy, and it just it I feel like it dismantles even yourself,
Mm.
your view of yourself. And so I feel like I've been on this journey where God's consistently like, no, girl, you matter. And
Mm.
actually I have need of you, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah. Yeah.
you are, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you are enough, and you do deserve to be loved, and not just in spaces where like romantically, but even friends, and friendships. And so I feel like my journey of restoration has been like, I think overall what I've learned is like God's heart concerning me.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like, hey, I got you. Because I went through a season where I was like, I feel like you left me out here. I feel like I
Mm.
ended up in this relationship because I was following you and you let this happen. I'm really mad about that. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So I feel like I've been on this journey where God is like, man, he's like, I got you. And I feel like he consistently removes me from other things so he can continuously prove, like, I got you. And so I
Yeah.
think that is what my journey of restoration has looked like, is me being able to go, like, I can do anything
Mm.
that God is calling me to do because he got me and he's with me. And even if it doesn't turn out how I expect it to, I know I'm never by myself, and I know that
Mm.
he has me. And so being reassured in that, I feel like, makes me so like okay with taking risk. I feel
Yeah.
like people are like, girl, you really just be out here doing stuff. I'm like, yeah, because I know God got me. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like, and I wouldn't have known that if I didn't experience what I experienced. And
Yeah.
so I'm always one to say, like, I wouldn't change a thing, not one thing. I know what it cost me. I know how much it hurt. I know what I experienced. I know what I endured, but I wouldn't change a thing, because then I would have to change who I became through it. And so,
Mm.
yeah, it's been like a cool journey. I've always be like, I didn't know I was me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know I was her. Like, wow. Every time something happens, I'm all like,
Mm.
dang, I ain't know. And it's
Yeah.
like we always say, like, you say something, you go, man, I didn't know I had that in me. It's like
Right.
you never would have known that if you never were in a situation to call that out of you. And
Yeah.
sometimes it hurts, sometimes it brings pain, but also it produces the person that God intended for you to be.
And I think that's the beautiful thing of it, because even I wrote down, like, I feel like restoration is God's love, his compassion. And I was just being reminded of, like, the woman with the issue of blood for 12
Yeah.
years. It was, he had compassion for her, the woman, the widow who her son died, again, compassion, and he healed
Hmm.
her son. And it just reminded me that it's in his love, it's in accepting his love, in accepting his compassion, that we're able to be restored and to operate with a level of boldness and peace that we never thought we could ever have. And I've
Yeah.
seen, like, just being, God says do this, and you're like, right, like, I can't do that, but then you do it, and then
Hmm.
you see how it impacts other people, and even how it impacts yourself, and what comes out of it. You're like, what? Who, me? Me, a
Hmm.
person of unclean lips? Like, I'm not worthy to
Yeah.
experience. And the more you do it, like, one thing I've learned from, I know I always like spit like Bible stories, but one thing I learned from Abraham is Abraham never said no to God, ever. Like, I don't think it's even on record. Like, God said, "Come out your father's house." Boom, man left his father's house. You know, go to this place, I'll show you. Lift up your head. Man, he lifts up his head. Kill your son. He
Hmm.
tried to kill his son. Like, to the point that because of that, God said, I can never do anything without conversing with my friend Abraham. I'm about to
Hmm.
destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. What do you have to say about this? And it just
Hmm.
brings another level of intimacy where you become a friend of God, you know, where he can trust you with his project. He can trust you with his what he wants to do on earth. And I
Yeah.
think it's like, I've seen what I mean, like, Brenda's holding back on me today, but you know, I've seen just the other day you did a Come Alive conference, like,
Hmm.
and God just said you should do that, boom, and you just did it, And I'm
Yeah.
sure that the testimonies that are coming out of that are you're probably thinking, like, little Brenda? I don't know. Like I don't want
Yeah.
Brenda, you know?
No. That is so true. I always feel like I am smack dab in the middle of something that feels so much bigger than me. Like even like now I will go places and people are like recognizing me from preaching on TikTok, and I'm like, I'm just me. You know what I'm saying? Like I was with my friends yesterday and he's like getting a text and he's like, the girl's like, you know Brenda Palmer? I'm like,
No
what is
way.
happening right now? Like this is really crazy. I feel like, but I think like, I mean, that stuff is cool, but I think the thing, to your point, is like the thing that matters the most to me is like I did have Come Alive a couple weeks ago and a girl got saved. And that was the most refreshing, like worth it
Yeah.
all the things that it takes to
Yeah.
put on Come Alive. Like, man, someone said yes to Jesus. And she literally comes to the altar and she's like, man, she's like, I'm ready. She was like,
Yeah.
I ain't never been more ready than I am right now in this moment. I want to do it. Like, I mean, like boldly just wanting to be with Jesus like that. Those are the things that matter. And I am often humbled and saying, man, like the fact that God would trust me with that. The fact that God would entrust Come Alive to me and say, hey, like, feed my sheep. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
create a
Come
space
on.
for people to encounter me. Like, I am humbled by it overall. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. You said, you talked about restoration being God's love. And
Mm.
I love that because I think oftentimes when we encounter something, we go like, man, I just want to be back to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I need to get back to myself because we experience things that shift us into a person. It's like you can never go back to who you were.
Yeah.
And I believe that journeys of restoration is God's way of restoring us back to our original identity. Because the reality is, like, he says, let us go and make man in our image. But
Mm.
because of the fall of man, when we are born, we take on the identity of sin. And all of those things that we experience in our life until we say yes to Jesus
Yeah.
creates an identity. And I believe that sometimes we go through things in our lives so God can strip that away. And then
Mm.
he gives us an opportunity for him to go up. Here's a mirror. And
Mm.
here's really what you should look like.
Mm.
I know you thought it should be this, but let me take you through this journey that
Yeah.
breaks you. And then I can put the pieces back together for how I originally created you, not the identity that you created.
Yeah.
So you get a job, then you lose the job. Now you don't know who you are. You're like, oh my God, life is over. And God says, let me put the pieces back together and show you that your identity was never in that job. It was really
Mm.
in me. But I had to break this apart. I had to strip this away. I had to tear this thing up so I can build you back into the person that I originally created you to be. And I say that all the time. It's like, I never went back to Brenda that I was before that experience, but I am back to the Brenda that God originally intended for me to be. I feel like I'm on a path towards the person he designed when he said, hey, let's put a Brenda in the world. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like if we can put that into perspective, if we can put on that lens of our journeys of brokenness and go, man,
Mm.
God's allowing this moment for me to be broken so he can rebuild me, he can recreate me into his original intent. Because
Yeah.
if that wouldn't have happened, I would have gone on a path that God did not intend for me.
For
You
real.
know what I'm
For real.
saying? And so those broken moments are really like, this is getting built up too much, and this ain't it. And so let me just knock this on down and put you back together. And in that, I do a deeper, more intimate relationship with him. Because when you lose something, you go right back to the person you know. You go like, oh God, I don't know what to do. I'm not gonna make it without you. And then he like, I've been waiting on you.
Yeah.
Like, now let's do this. You know what I'm saying? And now we develop a deeper level of relationship and we go on through the next season until it's time for another breaking. I feel like we go through moments of that. I'm in that season now where it's like, this feels a lot like, something I walked through before. I'm not sure why we are back here again. But I guess,
Mm.
we gonna embrace it. We gonna embrace it. And
Yeah.
and God's stripping in this season, he's pruning in this season. He's saying, all right, let's shine the light on that area you've been keeping covered or that's been
Mm.
hiding beyond all the things that you're doing. And let's deal with that. So now we can go to, another level. And so I think we have to be able to see it that like every level of brokenness is just a sign that, okay, God's about to elevate me, but there's
Yeah.
some things in me that can't go to this next season. There's some things attached to me that can't go into this next season. So I'm going to trust him even in the breaking, even though it hurts, even though it causes me to lose, some things. I'm going to trust God in the breaking because I know on the other side of it, I'll be right where He intended for me to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when you understand the process of being broken, you
Hmm.
just you could just be at peace more. Like you don't have to feel it the way you felt it before. Like things can happen,
Yeah.
and when they say it's like water off a duck's back, it's like it's happening, but yeah, it's necessary. So you just slide
Yeah.
it off you, and it doesn't hurt as much. And I think when we try to get in the way, when we try to make sense of why this is happening now, like
Hmm.
God, everything was good, and then now you come and you just threw the spanner in the works, and it's like, nah, now we're back to square one. And I think the more we
Yeah.
keep fighting God, the longer it takes. And God forbid we're like the children of Israel who refuse to be broken and restored. That
Mm-mm.
I think the Bible called them stiff necked people. Like
Yes.
they were so hard hearted, like that he
Hmm.
couldn't break them. That he said, you know what, the promised land is for the next generation. I'll
Yeah,
still
but even and when he has the moment where he's like, actually, I'm gonna give you the promise and I'm not going. Like
yeah,
y'all can go, you
yeah,
can have it. I'm a because if
I'll
I
stay
go
here.
with you, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah,
I'm not even
yeah.
we're not even gonna make it. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like where God be so fed up with us, like in a minute, I know I said I would never leave you or forsake you, but in this moment, I'm about to leave you because it's
Yeah,
either I'm gonna leave you or you die. And it's like but we can be like that because we think we know so much.
yeah, that's it. We think we know a lot, and it's in the humbling of yourself, I think, as well, like
Mhm.
recognizing that we're just flesh, we're just like sometimes I think that's why the devil's angry. He's like, yo, this is dirt. You're giving all of this to mud, basically,
Mhm.
and us that we're here, we're listening to your every command and whatnot. You're not even treating us, you're not giving us that same identity, but he chose to give himself to us and to make us in his image.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think highly of ourselves and forget that actually it's by grace. It's actually by
Mhm.
grace. We should be
Mhm.
somewhere else, but he actually sent his son to die for us, and it's in humbling ourselves that we're able to benefit from to have life to the full on earth, you know, and to
Mhm.
experience it here as well as in heaven. Um, so Brenda, what can we expect to see from you next? She like, what are we talking about?
I don't know I don't know a thing. I'm going day by day. I'm living my life day by day. No,
Oh
real
gosh,
like
she's like,
real
what?
talk. I'm more like, girl, if you know, tell me because I don't
Yeah.
know. Like for sure, I'm in this season where Come Alive is kind of like what's been happening. So
Mm,
at least once a month it'll happen. Where next month April there'll be one in Chicago, and then May there's a possibility of like doing one in LA and Atlanta again. And so yeah, man, I'm really just following God like day to day. He is not giving me any blueprint. We are just blazing a trail together that I don't really ever have a clue. Like I really wish I was talking to my mom today. She's like, "So when are you coming back to Chicago?" I'm like, "Girl, I don't know. I don't know anything. I've been in LA for a couple like almost a week and I'm like, you know, I only bought a one-way ticket. I don't think I'm
mm,
staying. I just don't know when I'm going back or I'm going next or in between." And so
mm,
I think like I'm just really in this space. To your point, you brought up Abraham earlier and he says, "Leave your father's house," he says, "and go to a place that I'll show you when you get there." And that's been my week to week, my day to day. I'm just like, "Okay, God, whatever you want me to do, I don't know." I really am just following God. It's like unsettling, but it is probably the most peaceful place I've ever been in. Where like,
mm,
because I'm never okay with just chilling. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not chilling. I'm actually doing a lot, but I'm
yeah,
not. I don't know like day to day. And so
mm,
Come Alive. I'm shooting Life in Perspective. We're also in production for In the Room. I'm working on like some content stuff with U Version and I'm working on a book too. So
drop.
I know like hmm,
I'm just working on some content with you version and
I'm weak. I'm weak. So yeah, what can you expect from Brenda to always be out here following God?
awesome, awesome, awesome. And another thing that I was gonna ask you, being consistent. I think a lot of people struggle with consistency.
Hmm.
And that's when it can look like. they're just going through like this whole pattern of just, oh, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start.
Mhm.
Um, how can someone break that? And I know you said decision already, like
Mhm.
just make a decision, but how can, especially when you start and nothing comes out of it, you're giving it everything,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's no fruit. And I always look at it like,
Mhm.
when that fig tree, that it looked like it was producing fruit, but there was no fruit on it. So
Mhm.
like that's demotivating at times.
Mhm.
So what would you encourage someone who's going through something like that? Like, I want to do
Um,
good, but nothing's coming out of it. That
yeah, I think I love that you use that language because I think you have to settle in your heart what success is. Like when you say nothing's coming out of it, what is the expectation? Because do you consider a thing successful when a person likes it or engages with it? Or do you
mm,
consider a thing successful when you complete it? Because for me, I never like I'm not from Atlanta. I don't really have a base there. It's not a place I go consistently. And with only 3 days, God said, host a come alive in Atlanta. I
mm,
said, okay. And I didn't know who was gonna show up or
yeah,
if anybody was gonna show up.
yeah,
But my success is not in how many people showed up. It's in the fact that God said, do something, and I did it. And
mm,
sometimes God will allow a thing to not perform so that
mm,
you can be stripped of thinking that how it performs determines if it was
right,
successful or not.
yeah,
Because success is in the step of obedience. It's
mm,
not in, and my consistency is rooted in pleasing God. So
mm,
why am I gonna do a video every day? Because God said do it, a video every day. If one person likes it, if nobody likes it, the fact
mm,
that I can say God said do a video every day and I can go check every day that I did a video, that is the measure of success. Did you please God? Because if it's rooted in anything else, that is really what you're serving. So if
mm,
if you post a video today and it gets 500 likes, you post one tomorrow and only gets one, you don't post again. Are you serving the instruction from God, or are you serving the numbers? Because
mm,
that means if the numbers are what you're gauging your success on, that's what you're going to determine whether or not you're going to do this,
yeah,
even though it was an instruction from God.
yeah,
And so I
yeah,
think your consistency has to be rooted in that. Is like, did I please God? That needs to be the measure of success. Now,
mm,
of course, we want things to perform well, but if it's weighing on that, when they don't perform, you won't be consistent. And
mm,
so I think like you have to like it has to be rooted in that, because if not, it gets muddy, and then you lose sight of your motives and you lose sight of your why. And so I think to help with that is discover your why. Before
mm,
you do something, why are you doing this?
mm,
Like, you got to do that. I think that is something that keeps me grounded a lot. Is like, if I find myself building content because I'm trying to keep a schedule, or because, oh, this hit, so now I got to keep up the momentum, then I've
mm,
lost sight of my why, because that is not why I create content.
yeah,
And so I
yeah,
think being, why are you doing what you're doing, and
mm,
sticking to that. And whenever you feel like, oh, I don't want to do this, remember your why. Okay, so God told you to do this, and it connected to this, and
mm,
holding that at the forefront keeps you consistent. Because I struggle with consistency too. Sometimes I don't want to do anything. I don't. I'm tired of it. Like,
I
I'm
find it
tired of
hard.
posting. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so, but I'm working on becoming disciplined, saying like, okay, I'm gonna set a schedule. I'm gonna do this. I'm making a schedule for the day. Like, here's a to-do list. These are the things I need to do, because I want to steward what God has given me.
Right.
And part of that is time. Time is the only thing that you spend that you can't get back.
Yeah, yeah,
And being able to say, okay, God, you entrusted me with time, and I'm going to steward it well, because at the end of my life, I'm going to have to give an account for all the things I did not do, or the things I did do. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? And so I want to be able to stand before Jesus and say, man, everything you gave me, I used every bit of it,
Mm-hmm.
including my time. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, you cannot be detoured or discouraged by the fact that something didn't perform or produce to your expectations, because
yeah,
sometimes it's just an instruction, and it's just God developing you, and he wants to know, are you going to do it
yeah. For real,
regardless?
for real. And I think it's hard. Well, not hard, but it's more difficult in this day and age because with social media, especially if you're
Hmm.
called to that space,
Yeah.
like entertainment, social media, whatever, in that where it's like numbers determine your success according to the society.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're pouring out, and then it's like, okay, like for example, you say one that can be really, really like let's get hit with a brick. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But recognizing that actually, why did God say this? Why did God tell me to do this? Like what I think the fruit should be might be something completely different to what God is saying. God might just want to
Yep.
be, can you be consistent? Can you be
Mm-hmm.
disciplined? That's the success. But you're thinking, yeah, I'm gonna be famous. I'm gonna
Yep.
be,
And
I'm
that's
gonna
the
be,
problem. No,
uh,
that is what God is after. That is
yeah,
what God is after.
yeah,
Because now if you're not a believer and you're
mm,
not doing this for God, then you might want to figure out
mm,
how you measure your success. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? But as a believer and as a kingdom ambassador,
mm,
my number one priority is to please God.
that's it.
So, and I think that you it is true. If you feel like you're called to that space, and I feel like I've been in a season where God's been like slapping me around, about that, because I think we have created idols, and
Mm,
we've idolized things that we don't even realize or recognize. And so I know,
yeah,
like, I went through a space where I was in Atlanta, and the same time I'm hosting Come Alive, it's Oscar weekend. So then I had an attitude. I'm like, why am I in Atlanta? This don't make sense. I make it make sense, Lord. I had a whole attitude, and God says, can I have that?
yeah,
And I'm like, no, I want to hold on to this. I'm
yeah,
mad, you know?
yeah.
And he's like, no, let's really talk about it. So then I'm, trying to give him an excuse on why I feel the way I feel, because we will use God's assignment on our lives
Mm,
to credit the instruction he gave for the moment.
mm, mm,
Because I can say, well, God, you said that. You called me to spaces to establish the kingdom of God. He said, yeah, but what is the kingdom of God? What does that
mm,
mean to establish the kingdom of God? Well, it's
right.
his will on earth. He said, so what did I tell you to do? I said, you
Yeah.
said host Come Alive in Atlanta. He said, so that's the kingdom of God. That's establishing the kingdom of God.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think what he's helping me to realize in this season is, like, the things that we think are important are really distracting us from the thing that is actually important.
Say
And
that.
so it's like, it's not important. Numbers
Yeah.
are not important. If
Yeah.
God wanted you to influence the world, he could snap his fingers and make that happen. So, but he needs to know you can handle it. And if
Mm,
you won't be consistent in an instruction
mm,
because it didn't produce the results that you were looking for, you couldn't handle the actual result being produced.
yeah.
Because if I'm after numbers and that's what's driving me, the moment I get those numbers, then I forget why I was even there,
Mm,
or the fact
absolutely.
that I'm on assignment. So then I start serving the thing I'm supposed to influence. And so
Mm,
I feel like God's been in a space where he's been snatching that, like, just pulling the covers back. Like, girl, no, let's deal with the root of that. Like,
yeah.
why you want to be in that room? Why you feel like you need to be there? Why you feel like you need to be in the mix of things? Why you feel like people need to know your name? Like, let's deal with that. So when I take you into a space, you can actually understand that you're there to serve me, not it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've been in a season where God is like, unfollow that and stop looking at that and stop watching that and stop talking to this person and stop going to that event or stop looking at that event. Because what
Mm,
I recognized was I started to feed myself discontentment with a season I'm actually very content in. I am
mm,
okay with where I am, but the more I fed what was going on, then I'm missing out on something I don't even really want to go to. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Like, it's like, but it's a distraction, because then if I'm not present in the moment I'm supposed to be serving, I'm thinking about something else. And
mm,
so it's just kind of like we got to recognize that this season is really, really important, and we gotta guard our ear, we gotta guard our gates, because
yeah.
it's infiltrating the very thing that God is going to use to influence. And so I think, like, you to be a believer means the world will hate you.
Mm.
So if everybody loves you,
Whose side are you on?
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm saying, and I'm not saying like you won't be liked, but at
Mm.
some point, what
You've
you
got
stand for is going to disrupt the
absolutely,
world.
absolutely.
And you gotta be able to be okay with people not liking it,
Mm.
because then God will know, like, okay, now you could go in the room, because I know when I tell you to say something, you're not
Yeah.
gonna consider.
Yeah. Facts. Facts. And I think one thing that God was teaching me personally is like, especially with this, is like I don't want you to promote it. Because
Hmm.
it's like I'm gonna promote you. I said, God, so I can't even cut clip. He said specifically Instagram. Like I for the past, I don't know, 3 months or 4 months, I haven't cut any clips for Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, God, but that's where all my following is. Like that's where people know me.
Mm-hmm.
I've been consistent there. Like, and God is like, no, I'm gonna promote you. So I'm just doing these videos, dropping it, not sending no links and whatnot. And do you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
just looking at numbers thinking, God, like this could be like a lot more, you know, like than what it is right now. And God is like, nope, I want to promote you. And it's hard because my fingers started itching because I wanted to cut
Mm-hmm.
it, I wanted to pull it. And then I said, okay, Esther, why do you feel like you need to do something? Do you
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
God enough to promote you the way, like, if God wanted to, and he always reminds me of Joseph. In one
Mm-hmm.
day, he went from
Yeah.
some ruggedy looking man to getting shaved up, clothed in royal um regalia, and he went before Pharaoh
Yeah.
and became president in one day.
Yeah. No,
One-
it is this, we go back to trust, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
if there's a word over your life, it's
yeah,
going to come to pass. I'm not
yeah,
saying that there aren't steps that you're going to have to take, but it's literally like it that happened to me. Now,
mm,
I never actually used TikTok.
mm,
I probably had 7 to 10 followers. I
yeah,
probably had like one or two videos, which were like some videos from Instagram that I put on TikTok.
mm,
I never used it. And one day, God told, like, I posted a clip. And I think I might have started like posting some sermon clips, but they weren't
mm,
really doing anything. And this one particular clip was about a woman who was in the room where I prayed for thyroids, and she
mm,
had been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And God gave me a very clear instruction on how to pray and what to say. And
mm,
so basically, she had three. And when she went to the doctor, two of them had disappeared. And
right,
the largest one was so small, they couldn't even measure it. And
wow,
so that was the video I posted. So it was like me in the clip praying and then someone sending a voice note. And I posted that on TikTok.
wow,
Within less than 7 days, I had 10,000 followers.
wow, wow.
From a
That's
sermon, from a I was very confused. And like when I say I was never on TikTok, my
mm,
Instagram followers started going up. And I'm like, what is
mm,
happening today? And I just so happened to look on TikTok and see the video. The next 2 days later, my friend goes, Brenda, you need to post a clip about the handprint on your
mm,
mirror in the bathroom. She said, no, God says post it now. I said,
yeah,
okay. So I'm just posting it on TikTok.
yeah,
Blew up again. Within, I don't know, 15, I was at 15K, less than 2 weeks. Less
wow,
than 2 weeks. It was like,
mhm,
wait, what is going on? And
yeah,
so now, I mean, all the way from that to like being somewhere and somebody going, I see you preaching on TikTok. It's like, okay, whatever. Now
yeah,
for me, I wanted to be famous, but for like a film or like win Emmy or an Oscar or, hey, I really saw that cool thing you created. I never expected to be walking somewhere and somebody recognized me for preaching.
yeah,
Never
yeah,
asked for that. You know what I'm saying? But to that point is like God got a plan and he gonna do whatever he wants to do. And
absolutely.
I think it's like even in that is like, man, I'm humbled that God would entrust me to be a carrier of the gospel. That people
Mm,
would get to know about Jesus on a social media platform, you know what I'm saying? And I never want to lose that heart. I
mm,
never want it to become about me. I never want it to become about building a platform or building an altar for myself. I never want that. And my prayer consistently every day is like, Lord, if there's ever anything you would walk me into that would make me forget you, I don't want it. I don't
yeah,
ever want to see it. I never
mm,
want it to be presented. I don't want it. Like, and
mm,
I literally, even when I was in Atlanta, I'm like, God, even the space of media, you can have it. I
mm,
don't want it. Like, because it
mm,
is disrupting my peace right now. So I don't even want it. And 30 minutes after I had that prayer in a service, someone comes and gives me a word and tells me
yeah,
God's transitioning you mountains. He's taking you
wow,
from the church to media. I said, I
yeah,
just said I didn't want this. I don't understand why you keep doing this to me. And so, and I feel like God was like, I wasn't asking you to give it up. I
yeah,
was asking you to remember. He said, I gave you a word and you started pursuing the word
mm,
and forgot to pursue me. And that we have to be very careful of that, because
Mm,
God will give us a word either from him or through another person, and we'll instantly start, okay, what I got to do? I got to make these moves. I got to do this. I got to get connected to this person. I got to network. I got to get in a room. And he's like, no, no, no. A word, an insight, a prophetic word over your life is to give you insight into me.
yeah,
It's to go, here's what I said about you. Now come talk to me so I
yeah,
can show you who you are. It's a confirmation of what God's already proclaimed over your life. But we
yeah,
sometimes get so caught up in like, oh shoot, that's me. Let me see how I can make it happen. And he's like, you missing the point.
yeah.
Anything in life, whether it's an instruction to do something or whether it's a word about who you are, God is after your heart. He is
Mm,
after intimate relationship with you. So any experience or encounter you have with him is to push you to him. Even a
mm,
healing, you say, man, God healed my body. It's to push you into relationship with God. And I
yeah,
think we miss it. We think it's about God getting us in a room. Well, why would you be in a room? To represent a person you don't actually know. That's
mm,
like, that is a benefit of relationship. And
yeah,
so I think, like, if we could keep our focus and our motives
mm,
pure and understanding, like, okay, God, really this is about you, because Jesus could have been a boss,
mm,
not to say that he wasn't, but he could have bossed and flexed a lot more than he did. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
He could have just been doing miracles for the fact that he could do miracles.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I'm saying? And
Mhm,
he always kept, I don't I don't do anything unless the Father says do it. I don't say anything unless the Father says it. And
mm,
so I think that has to be our posture. Like, I'm only doing what God is telling me to do,
yeah,
and my motive behind it is whatever his heart is for it.
mm, yeah. Because like I think I've said this before, like, but when Jesus became famous, he went away to pray more. You always hear that he goes away
Yep.
back to God to get to that intimate place to not be so gassed. But because if you deep it, he said that this is not the time that I want you to serve me, like to recognize me as king. He would do things and say, "Don't tell anyone." He'll heal someone and
Mm-hmm.
say, "Don't tell no one." Because this is not the time. Like I need to be glorified by the Father first. Type of vibe. So it's very important that we don't chase prophecy or we don't chase the word rather and forget the maker, the person that can actually give you
Yep.
the tools, the resources, the strategy and the wisdom to actually make it, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. Like I see it like someone just get you found instructions of how to make a car and you said, all right, cool, let me just get these tools and try to put it together. Whereas there's a process of creating that car. There's certain machinery that needs to put that thing together, and you end up
Mm-hmm.
making a mess. And you're like, oh, I've lost the screw, I've lost this or whatever. But leave it to the originator to take you through, even if you are gonna make the car. But get the instructions first. We don't want to be apprentices anymore. We don't want to be
Yeah.
interns anymore. Like, I heard someone say the other day that Elisha spent his time pouring water on Elijah's hands, right? While the other prophets were in the school of prophecy, they were there like saying, "Oh yeah, your master's gonna be leaving you," and he's like, "Yeah, I know, but shush, be quiet," because he was serving Elijah. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because he had that ability. He looked at who God placed in his for him to serve at that moment in time, that he was able to acquire a double portion of what Elijah had. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's because we missed that. We're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm here. Like I know I'm in the school of this. I'm doing this. I'm
Yeah.
doing that. We miss God, and we end up
Mm-hmm.
having I'll even say 20% fruit fold of what we could have had when we could have had 100.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah,
No,
man,
so
that's
real.
shit. That's blessing. I feel like you were just chatting to me, because like,
Yeah, no, I think because it's really easy to get caught up in chasing things.
yeah,
And I feel like when I was having that little meltdown in Atlanta, I feel like I was like, girl, what is even going on? And I'm like, I don't even know how I got here. You know what I'm saying? And literally, like, he started getting on me. He's like, what are you feeding yourself? And if
wow,
I'm consistently scrolling, he said,
mm,
how are you going to ever influence or impact what you serve?
yeah,
And I said, whoa, back it up. I wasn't saying all of that. He's like, no, that's what it is. He's like, if
mm,
you can't give it up, it is an idol and you are serving it, because we are
mm,
all created to worship. We are all created to worship. So we are worshiping something. throughout our
Yeah.
day-to-day lives. And if I am consistently feeding myself with this, it literally created a discontentment in my heart that wasn't mine. And so
Mhm.
it's like, all right, so I'm starting to shut it down. So I'm in the process of like just unfollowing stuff. Just like, all right, this gotta go. Like if it's not feeding the person or the place that God has me in right now, I gotta shut it down. And so I've just been in a space where I'm like posting and trying to not be on it as much because I need to be so I need to be so focused. It was like I feel like this season I was telling my friends like this season is so much like the first trimester of
Mm.
pregnancy. It is so much like that. It's like when a woman is in her first trimester, she watches what she eats, she
Yeah.
watches where she goes. They don't tell everybody. And that is very much what this season is like for me because I can't afford to miscarry the purpose that God's placed on the inside of me. I cannot afford that. So what I eat, what am I watching? What am I reading? What am I listening to? Who am I talking to? Like, I'm very intentional about keeping conversations short. You asking me a whole bunch of questions, I don't got the answers for you right now, and I don't need you infiltrating my focus. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not thinking about that right now. It's just like whatever the last thing God told me to do, that's what I'm doing until He gives me a further instruction. And so, like, I'm being so careful, and you have to be like that with everything. Your time, you have to steward everything that God places in your hand well. So you have to protect it. And so I feel like God's in a season where He's like, all right, let's peel back another layer. It's time to
Mm.
prune some more stuff. And what I could engage in one season, I cannot engage in it in this season. And you got to be okay with that. You got to be okay with like, well, God, I could go to the concert last year. And then in this year, He like, no, you can't go. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, because you know what I'm saying? And life in Jesus is not about perfection. It's about progression. So
Mm.
based on my relationship with Jesus, I start to reflect Him and I progress from one point to the other. So what I was doing 5 months ago, I shouldn't really still be doing that 5 months later if I am progressing in my relationship. Because the more I know Him, the more I recognize that ain't even me. You
There
know,
you go.
I don't have the same desires for the stuff I had in college.
Yeah.
I'm almost 33 years old. There's no way I should still be trying.
Yeah.
I'm not in the club. I'm not in
Yeah.
the club. I'm not in the club. I'm not even, I don't even like to go out. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless there is a purpose behind it. And so that speaks to maturity. The same
Mm.
way we mature in life. I'm not also still drinking from a bottle. You know,
Mm.
I have a cup with a straw. I can
Mm.
hold it myself. So the
Mm.
same way in the natural we mature, you know, from stage to stage in life is the same way we should be maturing spiritually, even the more, you know. So
Yeah,
this kind of
absolutely.
was,
And I think like you touched on this before is like for you to go to these high places. Like a lot of people want to be, you know, out there.
yeah,
You know, sometimes that's not what God wants for you. He wants you in the
for
backside of the
sure.
John the Baptist
Hmm.
ministry. You know, um,
Yeah.
but I think it's a thing where it's like if you are called to that space, even in the wilderness, like if you're called to that space, you need to have a level where nothing can attack you.
Yep.
Nothing, like you can be tempted so much. Like when the devil tempted Jesus, he was in the wilderness, and he gave him
Hmm.
everything that he knew he knew Jesus was gonna have, but tried to give it to him before time. And because of who Jesus was and his growth and his ability to recognize that there's certain things I don't need now. There's a time when I'll be glorified in it that
Yeah.
I'm able to say no. But if Jesus didn't have that strength, if he didn't have if his eyes were not focused on what God was doing, he would have said, "Yeah, let me jump down because the angels will save me and I can have the kingdom now."
Yeah.
But like it's recognizing that God is molding us for a place where we can be impenetrable.
Hmm.
Nothing can come to us, like nothing can shift us from our focus. And I think it's easier said than done, absolutely, but
Yeah.
it's something that God wants to take you through. It's a journey that He wants to teach you through. Um, day by day, He will mold you. Like there was a time when God was dealing with me, like with what I would call the bait sins, like the ones that everyone said, "Oh
Hmm.
yeah, don't smoke, don't drink, don't do," all of those.
Yeah.
And then later, it's like, actually, Esther, let's work on faithfulness. Let's
Hmm.
work on your character. The fruit of the spirit. What is that? Yeah, it's faithfulness, perseverance,
Hmm.
all of that. What is kind? Are you kind? I was like,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? And like,
Listen.
it's different. Like, it hurts. And it felt like how it was when I had to let certain other things go, but it's a
Yeah.
different maturity, you know. And I think it's
Mhm.
beautiful when you come out the other side. You know, I see like the
Mhm.
eagle when the eagles going through that. There's a stage where they go through where they can't see. Like
Mhm.
like they're on a lower level because they're trying to find themselves. But when they break out and then new
Yeah.
feathers through, it's like I'm soaring, you know. But they had to go
Mhm.
through that process where they couldn't even fly for a second, you know,
Yeah.
because they're being refined. But this has been beautiful, Brenda. Honestly, I've
Yeah.
been
No.
I've been I feel like even if I don't post this, I will post it. Don't worry. But I've been blessed by this. Like it's a
Yeah. Mhm.
but so where can we find you, Brenda, if someone wanted to get in contact with? Well, not contact with
Oh
you.
yes. On all social media platforms, it's I am Brenda Palmer. For like booking and stuff, it's IamBrendaPalmer.com. It's yeah, all the things.
Mm.
I'm excited about whatever this season holds because I don't quite all know it. But yeah, I would love to connect. I also host a Bible study every Monday called Culture Shaker. It's a virtual Bible study. We hop online. It's been fun. We are almost at the end of our 6 weeks before we take a break, but it's been great. So that's you just RSVP cultureshakers.com. Just pull up on us virtually. All the things.
Amen. You heard Brenda. Go hit her up. Go show some love on all social media platforms at Culture Shakers. And if you're in Chicago, Atlanta, LA, go hit up
Mm-hmm.
Come Alive conference. You know, go and be blessed by that. But yeah, guys, peace.